Join the euro. We will never be part of Eurozone bailouts, never be part of the passport-free, no borders area, or a European army, or an EU superstate. 3 years ago, I committed to the British people that I would renegotiate our position in the European Union and hold an in-out referendum. Now I'm delivering on that commitment. You will decide, and whatever your decision, I will do my best to deliver it.
The European Union was a noble dream in the last century, but today it has failed. It has turned into a nightmare.
If we as a country decide to quit, then we're out for good. There's no going back.
Solange die Musik noch zu Herzen geht, die alte Welt sich weiter dreht. Solange wir Menschen zueinander stehen, kann uns auch nichts geschehen. Ist auch der Himmel manchmal grau in grau, hab doch ein bisschen Mut. Der Himmel wird auch wieder blau, mit Musik wird alles gut.
In 2016, 17.4 million of us voted to leave the European Union. We ignored the scare stories fed to us by Remainers. Fear and coercion seemed to be their only argument. We were told that food prices would rise, but the EU countries have the highest prices in the world, with an average of 17% tariffs added to imports. Some foods, such as chicken, come in at more than 70%. Post-Brexit, the only way food prices would rise is if the UK government imposed higher tariffs. But food prices would be reduced because the EU sets these tariffs to protect French farmers from global competition. Another tale of doom was that there would be thousands of deaths due to the lack of fresh fruit and veg and medications. But this would only happen if the French government were to stop trucks at Calais and the UK at Dover. The head of Calais, Jean-Marc Pessisseux, had repeatedly said there would be no delays, but this was also dismissed by Remainers. And we were told that the UK must stay in the customs union and single market in order to keep the peace in Ireland. Lars Carlson from Swedish Customs proposed Smart Border 2.0. This works on a trusted trader basis, so each participating country must trust another. It was a very viable proposition, but was also quickly dismissed. When Ted Heath took us into Europe in 1973, he reassured us that we wouldn't lose our sovereignty. But the UK signed more and more treaties, relinquishing more power each time. Enoch Powell in the 70s and Margaret Thatcher in the 80s both had reservations about becoming too embroiled in EU dealings.
These people say to their hearers, you can no longer rely upon yourselves, on the British electorate to reject the politics which you abhor. Your only safety, they now say to the British electorate, is that these matters be taken out of the hands of the British nation and entrusted to people who are wiser than the British and who, incidentally, are more dedicated to capitalism. It is horrifying that this appeal is being so greedily absorbed and disseminated by large sections of the public. If the word fascist had not been so abused, I would be tempted to define that as a species of fascism.
In 1994, the then Chancellor of Germany, Helmut Kohl, revealed the plan for a federal Europe superstate. It was known as Kohl's theory of Europe. The aim was for one parliament, one government, one court of justice, one currency, one flag and one anthem. I do not believe any country of the EU would have chosen this, so the truth had to be hidden. At the beginning of this video, we heard David Cameron state that there would be no army, no euro and no superstate. Most politicians are keen to dispel this myth.
The whole point of this debate is 40 years on. 40 years ago, it was a common market. Now it's a European Union that wants an air force, an army, a navy, and wants to militarily intervene. Indeed, one of your own senior MEPs wanted missile strikes to be launched against Syria until you were beaten in the House of Commons. This country, Nick, has had enough of getting involved in endless foreign wars.
These are dangerous.
Whether it's you doing it or anybody else doing it, and there is no evidence. Hang on. There is no evidence that our military intervention in these countries is making life better. As I say, with you as Deputy Prime Minister,
that's not the question.
With you as Deputy Prime Minister, we bombed Libya, and it's worse now than it was then. And the answer to Charles's question is, I don't want to be part of a European foreign policy.
The problem... This is a dangerous fantasy. The idea that there's going to be a European Air Force, a European army, it is simply not true. The problem with people like Nigel Farage is they swing at windmills. They see conspiracies everywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if Nigel Farage soon tells us that the moon landing was a fake, that Barack Obama isn't American, that Elvis isn't dead. It is not going to happen.
Denn Europa kann natürlich nur funktionieren als Rechtsgemeinschaft, wenn das Recht überall gleichermaßen gilt und geachtet wird. Wer darauf setzt, Probleme alleine durch neue Schulden zu lösen und eingegangene Verpflichtungen missachtet, der stellt die Grundlagen für die Stärke und die Stabilität des Euroraums in Frage. Denn unsere gemeinsame Währung kann nur funktionieren, wenn jedes einzelne Mitglied seine Verantwortung für tragfähige Finanzen auch zu Hause erfüllt. Wir haben große Fortschritte bei der strukturierten Zusammenarbeit im militärischen Bereich erreicht. Das ist gut und wird ja auch hier weitestgehend unterstützt. Aber wir sollten, das sage ich sehr bewusst auch aus der Entwicklung der letzten Jahre, wir sollten an der Vision arbeiten, eines Tages auch eine echte europäische Armee zu schaffen.
When I first heard about the idea for a European army about 2 weeks before the referendum, I couldn't understand why there would be a need for a European army when we already have NATO. But it's widely believed by Eurosceptics like myself that it's just another step towards absolute control. If we take a look back over history, we can see that the roots of the EU project began in the 1920s. But in 1941, the Nazis came up with an idea which then became a plan in 1942. It was the Europäische Wirtschaftsgemeinschaft, the European Economic Community. The plan was created when the Germans realised that they were not going to win the war. The plan included a single currency. Now I recommend, if you want to find out, I won't go into the details, but if you want to find out more, then I can highly recommend Atkinson and McVerter's book. It was written in 1995 and it's called Treason at Maastricht. It's brilliant. I read it when I was at university. In 1946, due to political reasons, the EU went from being Nazi to communist. Another book I can recommend is Booker and North. It's called The Great Deception, Can the EU Survive? 2003. So how much power has the UK lost to the EU? It's crazy. We live on an island, we're surrounded by seas, and yet we're only allowed to fish in 20% of them. This table shows Britain at the bottom in pink. I'll read out the boxes because they're quite small. Government acts as an agent to carry out EU law and policies. Parliament rubber stamps EU law, policies and directives. Courts takes decisions where EU law overrides national law. EU law and policies, applicable to institutions, industries, organisations, local and regional authorities, electorate and all peoples in Britain. The EU wants to federalise Europe. It is not a conspiracy theory made up by the right, it is a fact. Martin Schulz of the German SDP has been very open about this. He said he would like to see this happen by 2025. During my research, I came across an interesting article by Jacob Campbell from the Bruges Group. It's called Democracy and the European Superstate. I've chosen 2 parts as the article is lengthy. I'll read it out because the writing is small. Is the EU a democracy? I have never understood why public opinion about European ideas should be taken into account. This is a quote from Raymond Barr, former Vice President of the European Commission. Legitimacy. Case. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights regards democracy as the only legitimate form of government. Article 21.3 of the document states that the will of the people shall be the basis of the authority of government. In a recent investigation into the state of democracy around the world, The Economist magazine's Comprehensive Democracy Index explains as part of its methodology that a high turnout in national elections is generally seen as evidence of the legitimacy of the current system. Tellingly, voter turnout figures in European elections have been consistently low, failing to exceed 50% since 1999. Verdict. As far as the Democracy Index is concerned, the EU superstate falls short of accepted democratic standards, and its government is deemed illegitimate. As far as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is concerned, the EU is in violation of international law and has no authority upon which to exist. Referendums. Case. When amending old treaties or introducing new ones, the EU has promised that they shall only enter into force after being ratified by all the member states in accordance with their respective constitutional requirements. Ireland is one member state which requires that constitutional issues be referred to the electorate in a referendum. In 2001, the Irish people were duly asked to vote on the Nice Treaty, which they rejected by 54 to 46%. The EU's response was to hold another referendum the following year, which this time approved the treaty. Events repeated themselves when in 2008 the Irish rejected the Lisbon Treaty in a similar referendum by 53 to 47%. Martin Schulz, MEP, then leader of the Party of European Socialists, seemed to speak on behalf of the EU when he declared that we must not bow to populism. By November 2009, the same treaty had been approved in a second referendum. Verdict: referendums are the purest form of democracy and as such are the clearest and most reliable indication of public opinion. To ignore them, therefore, is to show complete and utter contempt for democracy. If proof of the European superstate's intolerance of the public will was ever needed, the Irish case study is exactly that. As each day passes, it seems that our once-in-a-generation referendum will go the same way as the Irish case. MPs have voted time and again on amendments to the withdrawal agreement, with Speaker John Bercow selecting those amendments best suited to the EU ideology. None of this should be happening. We voted to leave the European Union, not to figure out different ways to stay. My friend Cliff found me an interesting article. It's from the South Bank Investment Research. I won't read it out, but if you're interested in reading it, just pause the screen.
Denkst du noch an diesen Tag? Du hattest Blumen im Haar. Über uns beiden da war der Himmel voll Geigen. Seitdem ist so viel geschehen. Ich hab auch Tränen gesehen. Doch für dich und mich gilt auch noch heut, füreinander durchs Leben zu gehen. Alle träumen den Traum von ewiger Liebe. Jeder wünscht sich, dass sie vielleicht für ein Leben hält. Und ich sag dir, du wirst niemals allein sein. Wenn auch Jahre vergehen, ist immer noch schön. Unser Traum, der Traum von ewiger Liebe. Leben ist kein Tanz im Mai. Leben heißt jeden Tag neu. Wege durch Schatten und Licht gemeinsam zu finden. Und wenn ich draußen aufdrehe, weiß ich, du bist neben mir. Ja, ein Blick, nur ein zärtliches Wort. Und ich fühl mich geborgen bei dir. Alle träumen den Traum von ewiger Liebe. Jeder wünscht sich, dass sie vielleicht für ein Leben hält. Und ich sag dir, du wirst niemals allein sein. Wenn auch Jahre vergehen, ist immer noch schön. Unser Traum, der Traum von ewiger Liebe. Manchmal, da frag ich mich, selbstverständlich ist das nicht, dass du für ein
I decided to make this video in response to Remainers' blinkered vision of their beloved European Union. I've been researching material since January and I amassed 42 pages of A4 notes, 23.5 hours of clips and 36 pages of printouts. I have picked what I consider to be the most important points to demonstrate that although the EU started life as a trading body, it has evolved into something much more sinister. I will leave you with one last clip of Guy Verhofstadt and the EU dream. If this doesn't open your eyes, then nothing.
And that is the real problem, colleagues. Why there is such a problem in this crisis? Because member states are reluctant to transfer new sovereignty and powers to the European Union. And we all know that the only way out of this crisis is a new transfer of powers to the European Union and to the European institutions.
Wir älteren Leute sind Leute von heute, sind, ob ihr's glaubt oder nicht, noch fit. Wenn früher die Renten wir einfach verpennten, heut machen wir jeden Unsinn mit. Herren ziehen den Bauch ein, Damen springen in Jeans rein, wenn's an der Hüfte auch zwickt. Manch älteren Freier, ob Schulz oder Meier, ist an der Bar schon ein Flirt geglückt.